Okay, I'm finally doing one of these extended movie critique things. What movie should I start with? What about an extremely goofy movie? That's an odd film with interesting characters. Oh wait, it's a sequel? Well, I guess it'd be weird to start with a sequel. Okay, I'll do this one first. There probably isn't much to say. It'll just be a quick little critique. Good practice. So the movie begins with a dream Max is having. It establishes that Max is into Roxanne, so much so he puts her on a literal pedestal. But shock horror, Max begins to turn into Goofy and wakes up screaming, establishing right at the start of the movie that Max is scared of turning into Goofy. So obviously the main arc of the movie is Max learning to accept his goofiness, right? Nope. So anyway, Max wakes up, his friend PJ phones him and says he's late to some unknown event, then Goofy barges in, dressed as a tulip for some reason, and is an annoying parent, setting up the actual main conflict of this movie. Max heads to school, everyone sings a song about how it's the last day of school, and they fire jockstraps at Max for some reason, which is one of those details in a kids' movie so gay it can only come from a culture where people just can't imagine not being straight. Boys firing their sweaty jockstraps onto another boy's face, just good clean Christian fun, clearly no subtext there. Max sings about how he's going to ask Roxanne out, but then goes all emo because she doesn't notice him. Remember when I said it seemed like the main arc of this movie is Max learning to accept his goofiness, but it isn't? Well, that's because there's never a moment when Max being goofy saves or helps him in any way. In fact, there's only one clear moment in the entire movie of Max being goofy, and that's this scene. We finally see Max and Roxanne together IRL, he feels awkward around her because he has no idea if she's into him, and this leads to him having an epileptic fit of some kind and belting out an accidental ugh yuck. Then he clutches himself like an anime character with an erection and runs away. This has all happened within the first 7 minutes of the movie. That's it, for literally the first conflict they establish in the first scene of the movie. Oh, don't worry, there is a payoff for this plot thread, and actually I was wrong, a second act of goofiness from Max, over an hour later at the end of the movie. It's classic setup and payoff. You set up a plot element, you put a reminder in for the plot element, and then, you have the payoff for the plot element. And while I commend Disney for managing to get them in the right order, they don't always manage that in this movie, more on that later, I'm pretty sure you're supposed to space them slightly more evenly. Max and PJ talk about this plan they have, then, Pauly Shore turns up. He's actually uncredited, which I suppose if you're going to have Pauly Shore is the best way to deal with him. And, oh wow, he's drinking from a water fountain with a straw. He's so cool and alternative? Is that what they're trying to say?
Slurpage.
That's what the music seems to be saying. They're trying to say something. Someone had to deliberately plan that he would drink from the fountain with a straw. The animators didn't just improvise it. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Then the student president is trying to give a speech, but the whole room is just too raucous and excited to pay attention. This happens.
Yo, Stacy! Talk to me, baby!
Because as we all know, you're not really having a good time unless it's making women feel uncomfortable. Also, why is the nerd caricature doing the harassing? Is this really what anyone imagines when they think of the kind of person who shouts things at women? I mean, on the internet, yes. But this was released in 1995, when most people didn't have web access, and according to some people, more than a decade before women started using the internet. So anyway, the president mentions she's having a party to watch the upcoming Powerline concert. The school principal gives a speech, someone asks Roxanne out, which Max somehow hears from the upside of the auditorium, and he finally executes his grand plan. He performs an implausibly well-produced lip-sync of one of Powerline's songs, which has a strong message of individuality that is completely thematically irrelevant to the rest of the movie. Roxanne reacts with total indifference, everyone loses their minds, but then the principal cuts the power. Apparently his momentum was powered by electricity, and people are amazed to learn that it was Max. It then cuts to Goofy, who exorcises the demons from children for a living. They establish that Goofy is good with kids. His physically abusive boss, or maybe co-worker Pete, tries to prove he is too, but instead offends the child so badly it uses its telekinetic mind powers to kick him. They further establish that he isn't good with kids. Goofy somehow interprets violence as affection and marvels at Pete's ability with children. Pete then says he's going camping with his kid and suggests something's wrong with Max. It then cuts to Max, about to be told off by the principal. Wait, they still had typewriters in 1995? PJ comes out looking traumatized.
Oh man, my dad is gonna smash me like a bug.
Good God. Roxanne walks past and once again shows total disinterest. Roxanne gives the shocking admission that she quite liked Max's dance, and Max finally finds the courage to ask her out to the Powerline party. Quite why he needs to ask her out to a party they're both already going to is a bit of a mystery. It's not like there'll be formal couples dancing or arranged seating. But anyway, Roxanne says yes, just about stops short of moaning in his presence, and leaves. The principal interrupts Max's celebrating and calls Goofy. Goofy then... Goofy... What are those pictures? Jesus Christ, Disney. Also, what is this? Why does he have all of these? I mean, America must have banned corporal punishment in about... Oh God. Oh God. The principal then gives an account of events which makes me suspect race may still be a thing in the Goofyverse.
Dressed like a gang member. Gang member? Your son caused the entire student body to break into a riotous frenzy. If I were you, Mr. Goof, I'd seriously reevaluate the way you're raising your child before he ends up in the electric chair.
Goofy panics but then has an epiphany. He decides to take Max fishing like his dad did with him. After school, Max is complimented by all of the students for his performance. PJ starts a chant that makes him so popular, less popular kids are erased from existence if they get too close to him. Disney then gets some more use out of that song they commissioned earlier, and Max skates home in a way that seems far more impressive than that song he did earlier. But then, in a scene that may as well have been outright called Refusal of the Call in the chapter headings, Goofy reveals his plan to take him fishing, horrifying Max, who doesn't want to go. Goofy says he'll use the route he and his dad used, a route that goes across the entire country but only has one stop for gas. Also, aren't all the big lakes in this part of America? Max doesn't want to go, so Goofy pretends to be devastated to try and guilt him into it, like a psychopath. Actually, wouldn't this be an entirely reasonable way for Goofy to be genuinely feeling in this scene? Why have they written it so he's manipulating his son like this? This doesn't become relevant later. What's this supposed to be saying about Goofy? But it doesn't work, because everyone in this movie is an unfeeling monster right up until the moment the movie decides they've learnt a lesson. Oh, and I forgot to mention, they're going to Lake Destiny. Subtle subtext there. Okay, then this moment happens.
Why are you doing this to me, Dad? 'Cause I don't want you to end up in the electric chair.
Electric chair? What are you...
I'm not giving up on you, son. Your old pop knows best. But...
And this is the point where the entire plot of the movie could be resolved immediately. All Max has to do is explain what really happened earlier that day, and the motive behind the entire trip will be resolved. Seriously, you're in no way curious as to why your dad thinks you're going to be executed. So they drive away, but then Max remembers his date, I think, with Roxanne, and this fills him with so much panic he skips several animation frames.
Roxanne.
Max nearly crashes the car trying to get him to drive to Roxanne's house, but Goofy is oddly cool with this. He meets Roxanne's dad, who seems to have genuine developmental disorders. Max explains he can't go to the party. Roxanne is sad about this and hints she'll get someone else to take her. Wait, so she needs an escort? Are there rape gangs in the Goofyverse? Anyway, Max panics and says the reason he can't go is because his dad's taking him to the Powerline concert in LA. This somehow works and impresses her. Wait, so when he implied that he had no choice in not being able to go,
You see, my dad's on this stupid father-son kick, and...
that was unacceptable. But when he says he's voluntarily ditching her to see the thing they're already going to watch, but from a better vantage point, that's cool. Okay. Max leaves, delighted at first, but then he realizes the trouble he's just gotten himself into. That or he just has surprisingly good taste in music.
I'm in deep sludge.
Max and Goofy are in the car and Max is strung out on heroin, so Goofy tries to cheer him up. This leads to some strange dialogue choices.
You think of a name and I'll try and guess who it is. Man or woman?
Oh, man.
Man. That's a toughie.
Why is a man a particularly difficult choice? There are two options under the artificial gender binary of the Goofyverse. They continue to annoy each other.
Oh, baby!
Wait, is that a beat? Oh god, that's a beat. Please don't be about to rap. Oh thank god, it's turned into a completely different folksy instrumental. I really didn't need to hear Gooftang Clan. Instead it's just them bitching about each other while Goofy drives erratically. He just killed two people! Why is that funny? He just hurt people for no reason. What is going on with this road? That's the guy about to be killed. Why is he in this movie? Why is he happy? This is a children's movie. Does Disney think this is playful innuendo? Yes, kids' films are famous for having slightly more adult stuff than expected that only adults will get, but how is this that? This isn't a line of dialogue with a double meaning. This is a person tied up with his feet in concrete. How is an adult supposed to explain that to a child? And what explanation do you give other than it's a man about to be murdered? Why is a corpse singing? What does this add to the song? Is it supposed to be funny? Max doesn't even react to it, which is the least I'd expect to be happening if this is supposed to be a joke. Goofy continues to be a terrifyingly irresponsible driver, and then they arrive at Lester's Possum Park. This seems like the kind of thing that would genuinely terrify a child. As is this. I get the joke is it's horrible and run down, but did they really need to use such creepy set design and everything? At least the people look normal. Ah! Kill it!
Don't you wanna be hanging from a tree?
What? What kind of camp has Goofy taken them to? This happens.
You need a big hug from Lester.
Don't even think about it.
See? Now you feel. Beat it, doofus.
What just happened? Did he get dragged off and murdered by a pack of ferals? Who wrote this? Someone was told to animate this furry getting murdered and just did it without question. Goofy embarrasses Max again. This spiteful urchin makes his voice heard.
Hey everyone, check out the door!
Jesus Christ, Disney! And no, I didn't add the glowing red eyes, the teeth, or that blood-curdling scream. That's all in the movie. Why is it in the movie? Who thought this was appropriate? Goofy dances with Max, embarrassing him immensely.
It's Junior!
What is this kid's problem? Also, am I the only one who thinks scenes like this are kind of irresponsible? Like, how terrified of social situations is this going to make a child? I can remember times when I was a kid when I was embarrassed in public, but I never found myself in a situation where a crowd of people gathered round me and started to unselfconsciously point and laugh. All Max is doing is dancing a bit. What's a child going to learn to expect from this? So Max storms outside and Bump starts the weather machine in their car. Goofy looks at Max's face apparently for the first time that day and realizes he's sad. Max summarizes the movie's conflict for the trailers.
This is the stupidest vacation. You drag me from home, you jam me in this dumb car, then drive 1,000,000 miles away.
And they drive away sadly. Or at least, I think it's sadly. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to feel about this scene. They set up camp and Max mopes at a river.
Hey, Max.
Somebody made the choice to draw that sudden break in perspective, but then capitalism arrives.
Did you say something, Max?
Actually, it's Pete and PJ, who seems to act as some kind of menial slave for his dad. Max discovers that everyone's heard about his alleged concert of Powerline, and Pete and Goofy are up on the roof, where the bowling alley is. Seems safe. Pete gives some parenting advice.
If you keep them under your thumb, they'll never end up in the gutter.
He seems to think that the best way to parent a child is the aforementioned slavery and by emotionally devastating him.
High five, son! Psych!
Why did they make him look this sad? Also, why isn't this movie about PJ? He seems to be the one with actual challenges in his life to overcome. Goofy takes Pete's advice and orders Max to go fishing with him. Goofy then shows Max the secret family fishing technique, which I'd love to show you, but apparently it's so secret Disney won't let it be broadcast on the internet, no matter how much I mangle it with editing. So I'll just have to tell you so it makes sense later. So, here are the rules of the perfect cast. 1. You gotta be loose, relaxed, with your feet apart. 2. 10 o'clock. 3. 2 o'clock. 4. Quarter to 3. 5. Tour jeté. 6. Twist over. 7. Pas de Dieu. 8. I'm a little teapot. 9. The wind-up. 10. And let her fly. So that's the perfect cast, which I have a sneaking suspicion may become relevant later.
The perfect cast.
The perfect what?
The perfect cast. Perfect cast.
Do the perfect cast!
The perfect cast.
Even Max looks fed up. Why is this the main plot point of the movie? As you may have guessed, this comes up later and saves the day, but why this? It has absolutely no connection to the themes of the movie. As you may remember, the extremities of this movie think it's a movie about Max learning to accept being goofy. And while I guess this is kind of goofy looking, it doesn't really require Max to stop being so self-conscious. And the other theme that most of this movie is actually about is Goofy learning to be a less overbearing parent and trust Max more, which this has nothing to do with. In fact, it actually validates Pete's authoritarian parenting style, because this is the only time he learns something from Goofy, and it's when he's taking Pete's advice. So anyway, Goofy accidentally snares Bigfoot, an animal which eats both wood and meat. It chases them, Pete and PJ leave them for dead, and Max and Goofy get trapped in their car as Bigfoot goes through their stuff. Later that night, Goofy tries to retrieve a can of alphabet soup, but he apparently has spatial reasoning that would embarrass a 2-year-old, so that leads to this tense moment.
You
Stop playing around, he's coming!
That's not even the correct angle. It's like that stick again, where the animators are allowed to see the backgrounds they were drawing on. Bigfoot ends up listening to the Bee Gees for some reason. Copyrighted music. Copyrighted music. I think this is supposed to be funny, but it just looks creepy. Max and Goofy start to bond over shared memories of soup.
Hi, Dad Soup.
Huh?
Oh, don't tell me you don't remember Hi, Dad Soup. Oh, come on. Sure you do. You used to spell things out using the letters like Hi, Dad or Maxie or...
Did Big Soup pay for this scene? They start to get on until the spectre of toxic masculinity rears its head.
Or I love you.
They finally start to get along. Goofy starts twerking for some reason. Just joking, this is actually Max attempting to reconnect to Goofy. Aww. Max is woken up by Bigfoot and Goofy snoring, so he starts writing this kind of paper email thing to Roxanne. He initially continues his earlier lie, but then changes his mind and starts to confess. But then he has an idea. Love that music sting. He changes the route, so now they're going to LA, as apparently Goofy can only read 2 square inches of a map at any given moment and will only realise when they're in LA. What is this angle supposed to be?
How many cups of sugar does it take to get to the moon?
What is Goofy on? Max litters dramatically and commits to the lie. It then cuts to the next day. Goofy and Max are in a diner, which apparently is hyper-industrial dystopia themed. That's an oddly artsy transition shot for a movie like this. Goofy notices Max is still looking sad, so he finally starts to trust Max and let him do the navigating. Fortunately, none of America's roads have changed in the 30 or so years since this map was presumably printed. Then there's a montage of them finally having a good time. Well, Max is having a good time. But then Max notices this and does stuff Goofy likes. Oh, I get it, they're finally starting to listen to each other. Weird how they're putting the solution to the conflict before the culmination of the conflict, but okay, whatever, it's a nice sequence, when they're not killing people. Carl's Butt Caverns. Again, Disney, this is not what innuendo is. There's no subtext here, there's only overt text. You can't misinterpret this. Then the sequence ends with them hallucinating a hotel into existence. Their hotel room is intensely themed. It must take them ages to clean this place. Those poor fish! The ones in Goofy's bed seem to have run away, thankfully. Pete shows up.
This is the police! We've got the place surrounded, see? You goofs come out with your hands up!
Why are they scared? Did they do something in the montage we didn't see? I mean, they have killed 3 people, but those were comic relief murders. There was no scene of Goofy and Max burying the bodies in the woods and making a blood pact. Pete sees how happy they are and is disgusted by this. He then overhears Max admitting he lied to Goofy. Pete is of course delighted about this and tells Goofy, who doesn't believe him. Okay, so I get this is one of the main themes of the movie, Goofy learning to trust Max and give him his space and so on, as opposed to Pete's oppressive bullying. This scene is pretty explicit about this conflict.
You know, maybe Max isn't all the things that you think a son should be, but he loves me.
Hey, my son respects me.
But shouldn't there have been some kind of contrast between Max and PJ then? Because PJ's been raised all his life by this incorrect method, yet he seems to be a nicer person than Max. We never see him lie to anyone or hit someone or litter, but the movie is trying to say that you shouldn't raise your child like Peter's doing. The movie seems to be trying to say that you should be honest and respect your kid, but it shows us a story where compassion fails and oppression succeeds. So shouldn't there have been a moment where PJ snaps, or secretly misbehaves, or at least is shown looking sad? Okay, there's those 2 moments in a 70-minute film based around telling you not to do this. Again, it's like the "it's okay to be goofy" message. It feels like they wrote 2 completely different screenplays and then hacked the bits they thought were best together without much thought for the actual narrative. So anyway, Goofy ends up checking the map Max altered and discovers that he was lied to. He becomes so sad that his face doesn't move for about 12 hours. Then there's this really tense scene where one of the turnings goes to Lake Destiny and the other goes to LA. Now, this scene would make sense if Goofy had refused to look at the map but somehow knew about this turning. It would be him testing to see if Max had really lied to him. But he knows that Max lied to him. We saw him look at the map, or at least it's heavily implied he did. They made that scene kind of ambiguous for some reason. Well, actually, he must have done, otherwise how would he know about the turning? Why doesn't Max realise this? So is it supposed to be him giving Max an opportunity to redeem himself? But Max hasn't admitted that he's been deceiving him, so it wouldn't be a redemption. And the bad thing he did hasn't really happened yet because this is where he's making the choice to go off-route. Wait a minute, if this is the main turning for Lake Destiny, then how does Goofy know Max has been lying to him? They showed him changing the map earlier, but then Goofy let him navigate, which made the route change deception redundant because Goofy outright allowed him to do it. There wasn't any indication that the stops had to be directly on the route. He called him navigator, not handbrake operator. And anyway, as this close-up of the map indicates, he's been taking the direct route to Lake Destiny because it's only one turning away from LA. So how could Goofy possibly know that Max had been deceiving him, or rather intending to deceive him, when the only clue that the intended change is a circle around LA? Wait, so if he's read the map and Max's deceit isn't apparent, then that explains how he knows about this turning, why he's tense in this scene, and that this is Goofy giving Max a chance to prove he hasn't been lying because he's not sure yet. But then why was he sad earlier? Did no one proofread this? Max chooses to go to LA, confirming what Goofy seems to have already known, and that Pete's right about him being a bad kid. I would have thought this would be the moment where Goofy looks sad, and that the anger would have been before, but whatever, they're not technically humans. I suppose they don't have to act like them.
Man or woman? Man?
Oh wait, I see, they're doing a bit of clever narrative mirroring. Remember earlier when Max was moody so Goofy tried to cheer him up with 20 questions? Well now it's the other way around. Very clever. So now presumably Max takes them somewhere, but this time they like it? Nope, they're just having an old-fashioned roadside argument, and judging by these roads, that turning was actually to rural Bolivia. Max tries to confess to Goofy, who refuses to listen because they need to drag this conflict out a while longer.
Gotta tell you something, Dad.
Why bother? I'm probably too stupid to understand anyway, right?
Wait, when was Goofy being stupid an element of this movie? He's never brought up feeling insecure about it, and no one's mocked him for it. There hasn't been a moment when Max said Goofy would never find out he was being tricked. This feels like it was left in from another draft of the screenplay. Max leans against their car, which apparently weighs as much as a small dog, and rolls away instantly. They both chase after it and finally tell each other how annoyed they are, except Max already did this at the beginning and middle point of the trip, so it seems a bit redundant. Again, they've only gone off route for Goofy's intended vacation for about 2 minutes. All he had to do was turn around at the turn he knew was wrong, and they'd have lost less than a minute to Max's plan. Their car is amazingly resilient, and they both die. The end. Okay, no. Wait, they're still arguing? Priorities, guys. Goofy mentions Max going to prison, and Max finally asks an actual follow-up question to this. They finally actually talk to each other, and Goofy makes the stunning admission that he's Max's father and that he wants to be a part of his life. Man, what a brave confession. They sing a song, the message of which is undermined by basically the entire movie we've seen so far.
Still, whatever mess I landed was always understanding nobody else but you.
When has Goofy been understanding of Max so far? The whole conflict has been his inability to do exactly that.
Oh, your moodiness is now and then bewildering, and your values may be, so to speak, askew.
And whose job was it to teach him those values, Goofy? I guess his mother could have, but she doesn't seem to exist. Actually, nor does PJ's either. They don't seem to have mothers in the Goofyverse. I like to imagine it's canonically an Alpha Omega Mpreg universe. But anyway, the nicest thing that Goofy can say about Max is that bad things have happened to him.
He deserves a hero's trophy as we face each catastrophe. Nobody else but you.
They emerge from the cave in a way that has absolutely no Freudian subtext.
So your jokes are all, let's face it, prehistoric.
I get the feeling this song was written before they'd actually written the film. When in the movie does Goofy tell a cringy dad joke? Or any joke for that matter? The comedy comes from him being Goofy, not firing off one-liners.
And your music sounds like monkeys in a zoo.
Whoa! And now I have another reason to be glad they didn't rap in this movie.
But when life becomes distressing, well, I be SOSing.
If you're having trouble guessing, here's a clue.
How does a fish biting his toe help me answer that question? Oh right, they both have fish biting their feet. Wait, what? That line makes no sense without the visual, and I say sense very generously here. They must have actually written that visual into the song. Whose go-to common ground imagery is being bitten by a fish? Was this actually the best thing they could come up with?
Oh, he seems intoxicated, he's just highly animated.
Wow, that sounds like a well-rehearsed line. Keep telling yourself that, Max, and remember, if the police ask, you walked into a door frame. The movie then tells us what has happened in this scene.
You turned into a true blue duo.
Yeah, for about the last 2 minutes. Shouldn't this be at the culmination of them actually doing something together rather than at the end of an argument? And then they resolve their conflict so happily they stop being animated. Max explains his lie about the concert off-screen, which is a good choice, we didn't need to see that scene, and it's probably the only time in this movie that cutting out part of the plot doesn't make things more confusing. Am I the only one who finds this water distracting? It simultaneously looks too cheap and too expensive to be in this movie. Goofy says they're going to the Powerline concert. This happens.
Now, how come you always think I'm gonna lead you into some sort of calamity? What's wrong now? Look! A waterfall!
Okay, so the joke here is that Goofy thinks it's unreasonable to assume his choices will lead to calamity, and lo and behold, they are now in one. Oh, the exquisite irony. Except he didn't choose to be floating on a car roof bobbing down a river. He had no agency in this situation. Okay, I realise this is really petty nitpicking, but all they had to do here was change the line to, "Now how come you always think we'll end up in some sort of calamity?" And it'd still make sense as Goofy admonishing Max's pessimism, but it wouldn't conflict with the actual things we're seeing on screen. It's kind of emblematic of the problem with a lot of the movie. It seems like it was written in a rush. They keep getting all these small details wrong about the story they wrote.
Like we're thrown in the drink, like we're tossed out of town.
They were never tossed out of town.
You even lied to me!
Max never directly lied to Goofy. And yes, he changed the route, but the movie then makes that something that Goofy lets him do in a scene that the rest of the movie completely forgets happened. So anyway, they panic, Goofy manages to support the weight of an entire car, Max ends up in a makeshift parachute, and Goofy grabs his rod. Goofy then relaxes and smiles, the danger having clearly passed. Oh wait, no. But wait, remember the perfect cast? That plot element they mercilessly hammered into your attention 20 minutes ago, but completely forgot to remind you about since? Max does that, proving that he does trust Goofy and listen to his advice. I mean, there are some problems with this scene. First of all, the perfect cast specifically says the first step is you've got to be
loose. Relax.
Which he probably isn't in this scene, given he's watching his father fall to his death. It would have been quite good if he had some kind of litany against fear type of moment, but I guess he is a bit pressed for time here. And secondly, he doesn't do pas de Dieu, which is the 7th step in the perfect cast. First of all, what does that mean? Oh, it's a ballerina move, and so is tour jeté. Why do they both know ballerina terminology? And more importantly, why does this movie expect most of the audience to know it too? This is a kids' movie. Most adults don't know these terms. They could have at least given us a clue and explained why they noticed by establishing that they like ballerina stuff earlier. They wouldn't even need to write in a new scene. There are 2 instances in this movie where they bring up Mambo for no reason.
A lot bigger than Xavier Cugat, the Mambo King. Everybody Mambo!
Everybody Mambo!
Just change that to ballerina and this would make far more sense. Also, pas de Dieu is a dance of 2 people. How's he supposed to do that? Well, I guess he could be using the term more literally as step 2, except as I mentioned earlier, this is actually pas de sept. This is a major element of the narrative structure. Could they not have put slightly more effort into this? But anyway, Max casts the line, and somehow the feathery hook falls faster than a full-grown dog person, catching Goofy. What is this fishing line made of? It can support the weight of Goofy and even a car.
Perfect cast.
Do you remember it? Do you remember earlier when he established the perfect cast? Screenwriting! Max summarizes the movie for the trailers, again.
Boy, this has been one crazy vacation.
And the movie does another transition shot way too good to be in a movie this rushed. I really feel like the animators got wasted in this movie. Goofy and Max sneak into the concert by hiding inside the cases for the single kick drum and cello that all pop concerts need. Max has some doubts, but women! However, the 5 seconds he takes to admire the local faceless womb bearers is enough for Goofy to disappear. Powerline arrives on stage in a non-lethal shrapnel explosion, the women from earlier grow faces now that they're performing paid labour, and Pete's alopecia-stricken brother chases Max. It then cuts to Goofy walking in on a woman getting dressed, and, it's funny because it's a sort of sexual situation, and she's not conventionally attractive, because this is a joke the world needed. Oh wait, she's part of that couple that appeared earlier. I do really like the way they keep having the same roster of background characters throughout the movie. I mean, it would have been nice if they had any kind of characterization. Not much, obviously, but maybe change them from the characters who turn up in the background to the characters who turn up and do X in the background. It would give them a lot more room for jokes, and God knows this movie needs them. So anyway, Goofy pulls this expression. I don't know what emotion this expression is supposed to convey, I just know that I feel very uncomfortable looking at it. He then falls into the time machine from Red Alert 3. The movie then does another one of its patented too good for this movie transitions to Max's friends. Or at least I thought they were his friends.
That Goof Kid ain't there!
Jesus Christ, Paulie. I know you set rigorous standards for yourself, but not everyone has that Biodome star quality, okay? Goofy arrives on stage the same way Powerline did, but for some reason he does get electrocuted. He must have been wearing conductive shoes or something. Oh, and an old friend returns. Remember the perfect cast? Well, of course you do, because its climax has already happened. This is what I was referring to earlier when I said the movie doesn't always get set up, reminder, and payoff in the right order. Yes, I know not every plot element has to adhere to that structure. And I don't want to be too prescriptive about the way every movie should be written, but this is perfectly written rule of three setup, reminder, and payoff. Goofy introduces the perfect cast in the fishing scene, he reminds the audience by doing it again in a funny, casual way by using it in a dance, and then in the payoff, Max does the perfect cast, proving that he's finally willing to listen to and trust his dad. The perfect plot structure. It's not like they needed to use Max's perfect cast scene before the concert to resolve the conflict, because they already resolved the conflict just before that scene happens, so it could happen any time. Like, for example, the journey home, which they show none of. So anyway, Max kills the security guard for having the temerity to actually try to do his job. Wait, what? Then Max lands on stage and, oh wait, are they going to do the perfect cast together, symbolising how they've come together over the course of their adventures? Nope, they do a completely unrelated dance. Of course. Max's friends see him on the TV, so now the turncoat Pauly Shore is back on his side again. Roxanne is delighted for some reason. I guess it means he didn't lie to her, but I would have thought a look of relief would be a more appropriate expression. She looks like he just did something big for her, which he hasn't. Max doesn't even wave to her on stage like he said he would. Meeting Powerline only benefits Max. I don't understand why the movie keeps framing this like it's him doing her a favour. Pete and PJ see them, and that's the last we see of them. I guess this moment of surprise is as much consequence as Pete's going to get for his horrible parenting. Way to stick to your message, movie. And it's a Disney movie, so of course they start establishing the breeding pairs out of nowhere. What other possible outcome could there be to a man and a woman having fun in each other's presence? I guess we should talk about the song. Symbology is pretty obvious, where once there was conflict, now there is unity, etc. Except the song implies this is the result of newfound love.
For the first time ever we're singing. You did it!
So either Max had a very fraught upbringing and this movie is the culmination of a lifetime of antipathy, or the newfound love is romantic? The song is sung by R&B singer Tevin Campbell, best known for the album T-E-V-I-N, the little-known first installment of the Stalker series. Wait a minute, this album was certified platinum. Quincy Jones and Prince were producers on it. He has multiple Grammy nominations. How did he end up here? I suppose it was in the middle of the Disney Renaissance. Their movies were becoming huge and he wanted in on the hype. So I'm guessing the producers really overhyped how big a deal this movie is going to be. Imagine how annoyed he must have been when he found out he could have been in The Lion King instead. So anyway, it then cuts to them outside Roxanne's house, having somehow made the entire journey home in a car that fell a mile over a waterfall. Max is nervous because he's about to tell her the truth about lying to her. I don't know why exactly he needs to tell her. He pulls it off and she seems quite happy to manipulate other people's feelings. In fact, he already told her the truth of what's happening at the beginning of the trip and she specifically rejected it. The movie keeps acting like she's been unfairly deceived, but she behaves like she's written by an MRA. Sorry, I can't go on our date, even though I want to, for reasons I'm unable to control. Whatever, I'll just go with your competition in the sexual marketplace. Wait, I'm actually voluntarily ditching you, but I have previously unrevealed social value. Oh, I guess I can hold off on that side order of Wang at the party. What message does Disney think it's sending here? He's honest with her and he gets rejected. He lies to her and is kissed. I'm surprised she doesn't demand an apology in the form of alimony payments. So anyway, he tells her.
Roxanne, I lied to you. I don't even know Powerline.
What are you talking about? 1 billion people saw you dance with him.
1 billion people. 1 billion people. In 1995, the global population was 5.7 billion people. The US population was 266 million people, so roughly 4 times the population of the USA watched this concert. 1 billion people is about 2/3 of the global television-owning population today. This was over 20 years ago. I know Americans like to think America and the world are basically synonymous, but please bear in mind that's only really true of the prison population. Anyway, Roxanne shares my notion that this is an oddly trivial thing to confess to. She drops the mind-blowing truth bomb that she liked him before she thought he knew a celebrity. I know, who'd have guessed? Even if he didn't pick up on her subtle facial cues, she agreed to go on a date with him before he lied. He asked her out and she said, quote, I'd love to. So either she was sincerely into him or she could just sense that, probably knows the celebrity aura around him. So she reveals the reason that she's into him is in fact the iconic Goofy laugh that he's been so worried about this whole time. And by this whole time, I mean it hasn't been brought up for over an hour. She asks Max if he's up for some unspecified activities tonight, but he says he can't because I'm kinda doing something with my dad. So they agree to go on a date tomorrow. Oh, and Max kisses her unexpectedly. Get it? Because earlier she kissed him unexpectedly when he lied to her, but now, wait, what is this supposed to mean? Is she lying to him now? Is that not really her dad? This movie keeps trying to do dramatic symbolism, but it keeps forgetting to actually make it mean something. So they laugh together, Goofy throws a gang sign, and is instantly killed in an explosion, which seems like karma. His body crashes through the roof, and he seems to be genuinely concussed. Max then introduces him to Roxanne. I think the dramatic implication here is that now he's proud of him, representing a change from the beginning of the movie. I think. But if this is the case, then shouldn't there have been a scene before where they nearly meet, but then Max stops them because he's embarrassed? Whatever, the movie's nearly over. Goofy introduces himself to Roxanne with more charm and romance than Max employs over the course of the entire movie.
Enchanté, mademoiselle.
And presumably she immediately leaves Max for him as he better appeals to her Goofy fetish. It then pans up to the sky because that's what movies do at the end, right? Maybe it's supposed to imply director Kevin Lima is God. Well, it is vaguely biblical. I imagine it's supposed to be implying things going onward and upward from here, toward the heavens. It's basically visual shorthand for, and then they lived happily ever after. And while I appreciate the restraint from not actually saying it, I would have appreciated it even more if they put any effort into this ending. Even if it had just panned down instead of up, because then by the laws of cinematic convention they would have had to show someone getting their just desserts in hell. Presumably Pete doing the tasks he made PJ do. That would have been a better ending, and it would tie up that loose plot thread. I mean, it would imply he died, but this movie seems to be pretty blasé about death. Or, you know what would have been an even better way to end it? On those last few frames of blackness that just hang there for some reason before the credits roll, write the words, "Stay Goofy." See? Perfect. It would reinforce the main theme of the movie, or at least the main theme the movie thinks it has. It would deliver a positive message of inclusivity and individuality like that one song near the beginning was trying to do. And it might give the audience a parasocial bond to the movie. They may start identifying as proud goofs, which Disney would love as that kind of tribal attachment is very easy to monetize. Be a proud goof like Max with this $80 t-shirt. Honestly, even if they just cross-faded with the American flag, that would have been a better ending than this. It wouldn't mean anything, but at least it would feel like an ending. Instead, the virtual cameraman just gets bored and wanders off. Then the camera falls back in its mount and the feed cuts. The end. So that's a Goofy movie. And my main question after having watched all this is, why was this animated? I mean, I know why it was animated. It's a Goofy movie and Goofy is an animated character. But really, how much of this screenplay could not have been more easily done in live action? I'll tell you how much. Max's transformation, Max's skating sequence, the ending shot of the open road song, the RV arriving, Bigfoot would maybe be an expensive costume, some of the travel montage, which is the closest the movie gets to the original 50s cartoons, all of the murders, the hotel room would maybe be an expensive set to make, the car crash, the waterfall scene, and some parts of the final song. 11 parts of this hour and 20-minute long animated movie. And really only the car crash and maybe the waterfall scene would actually be difficult to do in live action. The rest could pretty comfortably be done with TV movie levels of special effects and stunt work. The animation in this film is pretty good, despite what the weirdly terrible poster would have you believe. They really deserved something more interesting to draw. It's a Goofy movie. The point of Goofy is physical comedy, with pratfalls and Rube Goldberg disaster set pieces. You know, stuff that's easier to draw than it is to film in real life. But in this movie, he's just not very good at everyday activities, and he's unself-conscious in public. Oh, plus 3 short scenes in the middle of a montage, which are the sum total of the old-school Goofy scenes in the Goofy movie. Why? Director Kevin Lima said, instead of just keeping Goofy one-dimensional as he's been in the past, we wanted to give him an emotional side that would add to the emotional arc of the story. We wanted the audience to see his feelings instead of just his antics. And in trying to do this, he seems to have just made a generic father-son drama movie that happens to have Goofy in it. They even asked Goofy's voice actor to do a normal dad voice instead of the traditional Goofy one. Thankfully he refused, thus making this movie merely seem like a mediocre Goofy movie, rather than an unrelated mediocre movie that for some reason seems to have been made with stolen Disney assets. Which is the biggest problem with the movie. It isn't Goofy. The only remotely Goofy scenes in it are Goofy hoovering at the beginning, Goofy dancing at the nightmare camp, and that 7-second shot of him water skiing in the travel montage. And maybe at the end when the car explodes, which is also the only time they use the iconic Goofy scream. Seriously, your one big iconic audio cue and you save it for this. This rushed, oh yeah, this is a comedy movie and it's been a while since something funny happened side gag. Man, if only there was a scene in this movie that was significant to the plot and involved Goofy falling. Too bad that never happens. Also, I don't really think arc is the right word for this story. Yes, there is a proper plot progression, i.e., Goofy is worried that Max doesn't want to spend time with him, but trusts Max is a good kid. Max's performance causes Goofy to become worried that Max is becoming a bad kid, and so he no longer trusts him and decides to take him on the trip. Goofy starts to trust him again. Goofy learns Max has betrayed his trust. Goofy learns the truth and returns to trusting Max and thinking that he's a good kid, and Max is now willing to spend time with him. And while this looks like an arc, the word arc implies a kind of gradual progression that this movie does not have. Pretty much all of these steps happen instantly in one scene each. Apart from maybe the first step, that gets 2 whole scenes to be established. But after that, step 2 happens when the principal talks to him, step 3 happens in the diner, step 4 happens either after the hot tub scene or at the junction scene, depending on what the movie was trying to actually imply in those scenes, because I'm still not sure. And step 5 happens mostly off screen after the car crash. At no point do the things they've experienced start to come together to change the direction of the plot. New plot elements just arrive out of nowhere and slap the plot in a new direction. And it wouldn't really be that hard to fix this arc. Step 1 has an okay amount of build-up, step 2 is the inciting incident, so it's supposed to be sudden. And all the steps after that have some attempt to build up, it's just way too short or vague. So the scene in the diner when Goofy gives Max control of the route has sort of build-up in that they start to get on slightly in the previous scene. So all they had to do was add in some kind of explicit mention of Max's frustration at having no control in this vacation, and now it would have actual build. It would be Goofy slowly starting to listen and pay attention to what Max is saying, instead of steamrolling over him like he has so far. But instead it's just maybe implied that Goofy's figured out that this is a source of frustration for Max. It never shows this working, so we never really know why he makes a sudden leap of faith in Max. The movie chooses to neither show nor tell, it just happens. Step 4 is supposed to be sudden, and there's a kind of build-up in the ticking clock of when Goofy will inevitably find out about the lie. But the scene is damaged by A, the baffling mess of whether or not he actually looks at the map, how that relates to the following scene, and how he could even figure out that he was even being deceived yet, as I mentioned earlier. And B, the movie tries to protect Goofy's innocence by making him discover the lie semi-accidentally. I think this was to try and add emphasis to how mean Max's deception was, but it ends up impairing Goofy's emotional arc. It ends up being, I don't trust Max, to, I trust Max completely, to, I don't trust Max again, to, I once again trust Max completely. Wouldn't it have been better if he'd still been a bit skeptical about if Max is still a good kid? So when he learns the whole story later, his trust becomes totally earned, and he knows it was the right thing to do, rather than just being flipped back to the on state of his apparently binary social trust. All Goofy had to do was voluntarily check the map to see if Max had been doing something sneaky, rather than having circumstances prompt him into doing it. And then his, in this hypothetical plot, lingering mistrust would be confirmed. And Max would have to prove that he can be trusted. Instead, the movie makes him totally innocent well-meaning, and so it basically has the same arc happen twice. Step 5 is actually paced pretty well. The characters are finally honest with each other in a moment of stress, and they're forced to finally confront each other. And then the song has them admitting the problems they have with each other, but they get over them. The explanation of Max's motivation to lie happening off-screen is mostly a good idea, though it still seems like it should have happened before the big make-up song, what with that being the source of the conflict. At that point, Goofy still doesn't know why Max wants to go to LA, but he's apparently just accepted the desire to drive to large cities as a normal part of teenage angst. The final structural problem this movie has is the 2 scenes after the conflict has been resolved. They're the wrong way round. Max gets his homestretch fun happy ending, and then the movie continues, and now he has to be responsible and implement the lessons he has allegedly learned over the course of the journey. And then he gets his happy ending. Again. The movie really didn't need this final scene of Roxanne. The concert scene is big, visually memorable, and the credits pick up where it left off like the scene in between them never even happened. Yes, we wouldn't see him admit he lied to Roxanne, but we already know he's not going to get in trouble over that, so why should we care when we know none of the characters will? Or if they had wanted to have the scene of Roxanne, why not make the concert the part where he shows he changed? It could turn out that Goofy does know power lines so they can fulfill his lie easily, but Max refuses to now that he knows he needs to tell the truth. It would remove the concert scene, which would make the movie even less memorable, but given this movie seems to be prioritising emotional drama over actually being entertaining in any way, I don't think the change would bother any of the producers. Or even better, it turns out Roxanne found a way to go to the concert too. He confesses he lies before he goes on stage, but then he says that his dad did actually manage to get him into the concert anyway, because he did, showing that he's now proud of him. They dance and kiss on stage, run credits. Easy. You combine the 2 scenes and get rid of the part that implies they did the journey that made up most of the movie, again, off-screen on the way back. And I should point out, I don't think I'm banging out inspiring screenwriting gems here. I'm pretty sure if anyone involved had actually sat down and thought about this script, they would have made far better script changes. But no, they seem to think the idea of shoehorning family drama into a comedy kids movie was such a can't-miss idea that they didn't need to spend any time working on how well they did it. Turns out they were wrong. So what was the movie actually trying to say? So the first theme seems to be about individuality. Max is scared of being Goofy, he thinks Roxanne finds this off-putting, he sings a song about standing out from the crowd, And then he discovers his goofiness and who he really is what Roxanne finds appealing about him. It's a good message for these kind of characters. It's a shame that more of the movie wasn't about this, and it's weird that they appear to have started and then dropped this as the main theme. It seems like it would have been so much easier to write. Goofy is Goofy, and Max initially finds this embarrassing, but over time, Goofy's integrity and refusal to apologize for who he is causes Max to admire him and for the relationship to heal. Goofy can't change, otherwise he'd stop being Goofy, but Max can learn a lesson from Goofy's refusal to change and so change himself. Simple, straightforward character progressions. And way easier for kids and adults to understand than what the movie ended up doing, where Max starts to like Goofy because he's nice to him? And then he finds out that Goofy wants to spend time with him, which he already knew, and then they sing a song together. I mean, these aren't bad reasons for someone to like someone, but unless the message of the movie is supposed to be nice to your kids sometimes, it seems like a wasted opportunity. And speaking of being nice to your kids sometimes, let's talk about the second message of the movie. Give your kid enough space and trust them to be good. Now, this seems to be the main theme of the movie, or at least one of the most supporting scenes, but it's also the least finished. The individuality theme may only be present in homeopathic doses, but at least it resolves into the hoes and happiness that lie at the end of every classic Disney plot. But this one is very clearly established near the beginning. The antagonist Pete posits that children need to be controlled and can't be trusted.
Something's wrong when a kid won't spend time with his parents. Well, for all you know, he's running around with some gang and stealing stuff and causing riots.
And the protagonist Goofy says the opposite.
Oh, Max is a good kid. He'd never get mixed up in something like that.
Max's performance makes Goofy think Pete is right, and so he starts controlling and not trusting him, making Max dislike him. Goofy then decides to start trusting Max and giving him back control because, he remembers he's his son? I'm not sure. So for whatever unearned reason, he gives Max more autonomy. Max abuses it, Pete discovers this and feels triumphant because it seems his idea was correct. But then, they like each other? Not in any way that really proves Pete wrong. Max just admits to the lie that Goofy clearly already knows about, and Goofy discovers that Max had a reason to lie to him. I mean, it's not a good one. It basically amounts to him wanting to touch some boob. You can call it love all you want, Disney, but this movie makes it pretty clear they don't actually know each other very well. So Max betrays his parent and travels to the other side of the country because he's kind of horny. How is this the justifiable reason for lying that Goofy understands and forgives? I thought it might make a girl like me is about as trivial as motivations get. And I know you may be hearing all this and thinking, why are you reading this much into a kids movie? It's not supposed to be deep. And yes, if this was just a basic kids comedy movie, I wouldn't be trying this hard. But as that quote from the director said earlier, they were trying to make this more than just a comedy movie. They took the goofiness out of a goofy movie to make room for all the important things they were trying to say, but I just can't find them. Bigfoot is the most consistently goofy character in this movie, and in exchange for this, Goofy does what? Learns to like his son? Learns this vague and inconsistent lesson about respecting and listening to your kids? Also, what happened to Lake Destiny? Yeah, I know nothing in the plot actually required them going there, except for the fact it's called Lake Destiny. If you watched a movie about two characters travelling to the fjord of plot resolution, and instead ended with them falling off the edge of an unrelated body of water and going to a concert, you'd be a bit confused. Does this mean they never reached their destiny? Is this actually the bad ending? In conclusion, it's an okay movie. It's not memorable, and I doubt it's a childhood classic movie for many people. And before you get all angry insisting it is for you, is it really a treasured cultural touchstone that connected to you on a deep emotional level and informed who you are as a person? Or was it just one of the 4 working VHSs you happened to have in your home as a kid? So it's a forgettable movie, but it's not a hard movie to watch, which is a fairly important distinction for a mediocre movie. It has just enough visual novelty to stop you getting bored, but nothing in this movie is trying hard enough for anything to stand out. Apart from the songs, which actually are really good and definitely deserve to be in a better movie. And when you consider how much time, effort and money this movie must have taken to make, the main question I'm left with is, why did they bother? A goofy movie. Why bother? And finally, just to get some of that rage engagement, let's arbitrarily convert this qualitative opinion into quantitative data. Art, 7 out of 10. Literature, 2 out of 10. Science, 1 out of 10. Maths, 3 out of 2. History, 3 out of 10. Bechdels. This movie does actually pass the Bechdel test. There is this one scene when 2 women are not talking about a man. However, it ends with Max asking out Roxanne, so points off for that. Accelerationism, 1 out of 30 miles per hour. This movie does very little to accelerate the process. Murders, 5 out of 10. A surprisingly respectable body count for a kids movie. Odds that this very long video about a Disney IP won't get dogpiled of takedown notices, 0.5 out of 10. Jason Statham, 0 out of 128. Final score, 24.5 out of 223.